So I played some games last year. I made a presentation, it's already March, and I'm going to talk about them. So first up, games that I have beaten. We have Another Crab's Treasure, which is one of the most approachable Souls-likes I have played. Bunch of accessibility options, you can change the speed of the game, you can change enemy health, you can even give Krill a gun and just shoot your way through the game if you want to. But a very good sense of humor, very fun game, very nice to look at. Next up, It Takes Two. So this one is a 3D platformer where you try to fix the marital problems between the two parents. For the most part, it's fun, has a couple of frustrating segments, but the biggest hurdle is you have to have a friend to play with. Or I guess you could play with randos online, but that is not something I enjoy doing. Next up, Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. This is my favorite Kingdom Hearts game, if not one of my favorite games just in general. But the command style was great, a nice change up from the usual system from Kingdom Hearts 2. I love the story for this one. It swings for the fences, and there are a couple of misses because of that. But also, cartwheels. Next up, Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days. So this one was DS game, and it does show it is still enjoyable, and the panel system is great. But it does have issues with enemy health bloat, where they just arbitrarily pump up the enemy health to make it slightly harder to deal with, but for the most part, it just makes it more annoying. Next up, Kingdom Hearts Dream Drop Distance. So this is the awkward middle child in between Kingdom Hearts 2 and Kingdom Hearts 3. The Dream Eater mechanics are fun for the most part, but trying to maintain all of them to get the right skills that you need for battle and all the commands that you'll need to use are not great. You do get to switch between Riku and Sora, but the dives are just the worst on-rail segments I have seen in a game in general. Next up, Kingdom Hearts Fragmentary Passage. So this one was a tech demo for Kingdom Hearts 3. There's not really much to discuss here, but getting to play as Aqua again is pretty fun. Next up, Kingdom Hearts 3. So, as the finale of the series, they finally kind of figured out how they wanted to do all this stuff. Combat system is great. Keyblade transformations let you change your traditional sword movements to something like a gun or a shield, something like that. But it's also very big open worlds on the planet, which is very fun to explore. Next up, Sea of Stars. So this one is a JRPG that likes to have you manage your MP by dealing physical damage to regenerate it, or you can just use items, but the items have a fixed cap. You can only take so many with you. The break system is great. They did modify it since I played it, so it is slightly more difficult to actually take advantage of that now. But for the most part, you feel appropriately leveled for what you're fighting, but because of that, most of the fights, you kind of just feel like you're on the verge of dying at any given point. Next up, Umber Claw. So it's a platforming game. Every time you die, you will get some ability based on what killed you. A lot of the game seems to be themed around dashing, and the problem with that is that you can lose the dash ability if you go into the human mode. But it does have a cheat mode that you can enable. So, next category is AAA games that I played but didn't beat. First up, Baldur's Gate. So this is based on the 5e system. They incorporated a lot of the Divinity system into this as well. But it is mostly based off of D&D 5e. It does let you play as An evil aligned character, which is not something that most games tend to. Well, most games I've played tend to do. I know people really like the story, but I never actually got past Act 1. But the key thing here is it's based off of 5e, and that just opens up a lot of possibilities if you're familiar with that system. This is one of the best representations of a tabletop RPG I've seen in a game, because you can do just about anything. But it does change a couple of things, like Tavern Brawler is different in this one than in actual 5e. Also, Karlach. I will not be taking any questions on this slide. Next up, Helldivers. Well, specifically Helldivers 2. So this one is a squad-based shooter where you go, complete the objective, and then extract. It is a very chaotic game. From what I played of it, it was very fun. The only problem is, since it is squad-based, you do need to have a group of friends to actually play the game. But it's one that gets updates from a human game master who controls what happens in the world, which is very neat. Next up, Metaphor ReFantazio. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. So, it is a fantasy setting as opposed to Atlas's traditional either isekai or school setting. And it uses the SMT5 system. I believe it's called the press turn system, but it adds the physical damage types from Etrian Odyssey, so bash, slash, and pierce. But it has an archetype system, so you can change the classes that people are using, which functions similar to the classes in Bravely Default. But this game is an absolute joy to look at. Music is actually diegetic, and there is a lot of chanting in the soundtrack, which is just great. Also, Stroll. No questions at this time. Next up, Persona 5 Royal. So it continues the usual Persona formula, but it is a lot darker than previous entries, so that is something to keep in mind. The school sim stuff I found to be great, but also the dungeons tended to just be extremely long and tedious rather than actually being challenging. Next up, Sonic Frontiers. So I enjoyed what I played of this, but I did also get the deluxe edition because I wanted the soundtrack, which made the first area less of a pain to actually play because you don't have to farm the exploration currency. But there are a lot of open world segments in this game, and it's usually great to run around. It's very smooth until you hit a rock wrong and then you clip through the floor. But in general, it's very fun to just run around as Sonic, going very fast. The linear stages are an absolute dumpster fire, though. And those are required to actually progress through the story, unfortunately. Next up, Echoes of Wisdom. So this follows Zelda doing Link's job. You gotta defeat enemies, get the echoes, and then you can summon those echoes. Very focused on puzzles. It's also extremely kind when it comes to giving you health and not taking away health when you fall into a chasm and such. And there is a way to just play it as Link, essentially, using Sword Fighter form, if that is something you would prefer to do. Next up, Tiny Tina's Wonderlands. So, like most of the Borderlands series, this is just a looter shooter with a little bit of tabletop RPG paint covering it. It's not an open world game like some of the other Borderlands series, but I had fun with it. So, yeah, that's all I've got on this. Next up, the indie games I played. First up, Backpack Hero. It's an inventory management that uses Slay the Spire's energy system. It is a very slow start, but eventually you'll start getting new people showing up and you make new structures, and it picks up steam for unlocks. And there's 5 different playable characters in this one, which all come up with their own unique play styles, which is fun. Next up, Balatro. So it's just poker, essentially, kind of like Solitaire. You just make the best hand you can. You find a bunch of passives to boost the money you get from that hand. But yeah, this one is just very fun to play. It can be done in very quick spurts. It's on several platforms at this point, so buy it on your phone, buy it on Steam, but it's very fun to play. Fields of Mystria is a farming simulator in the vein of Stardew Valley. The style of this one I really enjoyed, and the jump button makes it so you can set up fences and gates without having to worry about, actual navigation. But the only problem is days are too short, so it doesn't quite feel like you're doing enough throughout the day. Next up, Hades 2. So it's a sequel to Hades. A lot of stuff is similar, but it's slightly different, so it is still feels kind of new. But you do get pets in this game that you can bring on your runs with you. Even more resources to keep track of for upgrades. And from what I've seen, it looks like it'll have even more content than Hades. Next up, Orb of Creation. It's an early access resource management game. I think Steam says that it has been abandoned, which probably is the case at this point. But still, for $5, it's not a bad game to do. It's a sort of like an idle game, but you do have to click a lot more stuff than you would traditionally have to for an idle game, at least in my experience. Next up, Palworld. So it's Pokemon meets survival crafting. So it's a lot of gathering resources to craft stuff, or I guess, force your army of Pokemon to craft stuff. But we've got 2 teams, essentially Rocket and Plasma from Pokemon itself. But you can catch literally anything that moves and, cause your Pokemon to work production lines for days on end without rest, sleep, or food. But when you start up a private server, maybe tweak some of the settings so that you can get things faster. Because that's one of the common complaints I've heard about this. And also, maybe make it so you don't lose your loot on death. So Peglin. It's basically just Peggle, but it's a roguelike deck builder. So I really like this one, but the progression is very slow. I think in the 10 to 20-ish hours I played of it, I was only able to unlock 1 extra character. But yeah, it's Peggle. If you've not played that one's also very fun. Next up, Power Wash Simulator. So this one is just you run around and you power wash stuff. It's just very satisfying to watch the dirt go away. The controls can be jank sometimes. A lot of the vehicles are kind of rough to clean, but they've got a lot of DLC like SpongeBob, 40K, Shrek, etc., etc. And Vampire Survivors. So this is the one that kicked off the Bullet Heaven craze. They keep doing a bunch of crossovers, so those are always fun to see. Like Contra was a surprise to me, not one I expected them to do. But yeah, this one is on just about any device you've got, so it's definitely worth a look as well. For games I did not finish, we have Akimbot, which is... It was described as a Ratchet and Clank game on the internet at some point to me. But it is just not satisfying at all to play. The weapons do not feel good to use, and it's just very lackluster. And then finally, best fan projects. Project Tahiti was something that came up this year, not this year, 2024, but it brought back the Marvel Heroes game from the late 2010s that I was a big fan of. It's a Diablo-style top-down game that just kind of died in like 2018 due to the company just shutting down. But they have brought back a private server that people can use, which is very cool. And Kingdom Hearts Melon Mix, which modifies the game so everything plays on one screen instead of the two DS screens, which I have been having fun with that, but it's probably just the best way to play this game at this point, because I don't think Square Enix is ever going to actually touch this game with a 10-foot pole, in all honesty. But yeah, hopefully I will get back to making Days content in the near future, but we'll see what happens.